Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I would like to talk about one of the greatest musicians from the past century who unfortunately passed away on Monday, and that is Mr. Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones has always been on my musical radar from the 80s when I started listening to this guy to just recently when I went to London and bought a record by vibraphone player Milt Jackson. Plenty Plenty Soul from 1957. Arranged by Quincy Jones and has a couple of tracks written by him. So a great album from the vibraphone player Milt Jackson here, which I just picked up a couple of months ago. Quincy Jones's influence on entertainment, on music and entertainment in general, cannot be overestimated. From working with the big jazz giants in the 1960s to composing for film and venturing into funk music, and then later becoming one of the greatest pop producers that's ever lived, going into producing movies and producing television series, going into publishing. Quincy Jones is to me one of the titans of music from the past century, and that's why I wanted to make this video. Now, as a thread, I'm thinking of using this gigantic box set, The Story of Quincy Jones, as released by Vinyl Me Please in 2022. It's actually a great starting point to discover the music of Quincy Jones, and there are some fantastic records in here. So I'm going to use this one as a thread to talk to you about the career of Quincy Jones. The records are in a slipcase. This box set also has a booklet with some interviews with the man. Even this sticker. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Stick it somewhere, yeah. Like I said, it gives a great overview of the man's career, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Quincy Jones started out as a trumpet player and also played piano, and he worked with all the greats. Started out with Lionel Hampton, played with Billie Holiday, even played in the horn section for television appearances with Elvis Presley, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, you name it. He worked with almost everyone. And in 1957, he released his first album as a band leader, This Is How I Feel About Jazz. It's just also included in this box set. So it's a nice document, the first album by Quincy Jones as a band leader. Great album. So he worked with a lot of great jazz artists and making a lot of big band albums especially. And one of his most successful collaborations in the time was, of course, with Count Basie and Frank Sinatra. And in 1966, they released Sinatra at the Sands with Count Basie and the orchestra, arranged and conducted by Quincy Jones. A phenomenal album from the crooner, the legendary crooner, Come Fly With Me. It Was a Very Good Year. Got You Under My Skin. Fly Me to the Moon. Incredible album by Frank Sinatra, arranged and conducted by Quincy Jones, and also part of the box set. So he had a lot of success with those collaborations he did as a big band leader. And then in 1969, he released this album on A&M. It's actually produced by Creed Taylor for CTI. You can see it there. Great album, Walking in Space. This has some amazing musicians on here. Ray Brown is on bass, guitar by Eric Gale, Bob James on electric piano, Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Toots Thielemans on harmonica, tenor saxophone and reeds by Roland Kirk. So an incredible lineup of musicians. This is going to be also a thread throughout his career, working only with the best. Quincy Jones always looked beyond the limits of what was supposed to be jazz, and always implemented elements of pop and soul into his music. So that's probably also the reason why he was so successful. Some other big band albums that he did were, and that are in my collection, this one, The Quintessence, which was released on Impulse, again with a great lineup and a great big band jazz album on the Impulse label. This is the inner sleeve. This is an original pressing, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And one of my absolute favorites of his is also with a big band, is Gulamatari from 1970. And it again features the most incredible musicians, a lot of the same musicians that I just mentioned, but here also Herbie Hancock, Valerie Simpson is on vocals, Ron Carter is on bass. So a great album from Quincy Jones, Gulamatari, reissued in 2022, on Elemental Music. Now, in the 1970s, Quincy Jones made a couple of fantastic funk and soul influenced albums. Jazz purists didn't really like them, but there are some classics right now, and one that is included in the box set is Body Heat, an absolutely brilliant album from the man, from 1974, so 50 years old this year. And again, a stellar lineup of musicians. I believe Toots Thielemans is on here again. He worked a lot with a Belgian harmonica player and guitarist. Who else is on here? Herbie Hancock, Billy Preston, Phil Upchurch, Wawa Watson, Eric Gale, Bernard Purdy is on drums, James Gadsden is on drums, Minnie Riperton on vocals, Leon Ware on vocals. So a beautiful, great funk album from 1974 from Quincy Jones. Some of the other records that he made in that period, of course, I have to mention You've Got It Bad Girl. It's not my favorite album from the period, but it does, of course, has the song Summer in the City, which was sampled in so many hip-hop records. For that track alone, this album is an essential one to have. Again, I could go on about the people he worked with, but it's just insane. Summer in the City is probably not the first sample that I heard in hip-hop, but it was one of the first, and most notably on the albums from Nightmares on Wax, who is DJ Ease from England, who for this album, the track Night's Interlude, the opening track here, he sampled Summer in the City by Quincy Jones, and he would reuse it on the next two albums as well to make tracks like Night's Introlude and Les Nuits. It was also sampled, by the way, on this album, Bizarre Ride to the Far Side, on the track Passing Me By. So Quincy Jones was sampled a lot in hip hop, and most notably that track, which is an absolute classic. Another album from the same period is Smackwater Jack. This is from 1971. This is a very funky album and has some of Quincy Jones's most famous work, including the title track Smackwater Jack, but also the theme song from the television series Ironside, which, if I'm not mistaken, was sampled by or used by Quentin Tarantino in Kill Bill. Another great track on here is Hickey Burr, which was a theme song from The Bill Cosby Show with vocals by Bill Cosby, and a nice version of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On with vocals by Valerie Simpson. And again, the musicians here, Hubert Laws on flute, Freddie Hubbard on flugelhorn, Toots Thielemans on guitar and harmonica and whistle, Milt Jackson on vibraphone. So yeah, another great album in the man's catalog, Smackwater Jack from 1971. And as the mid-70s approached, Quincy Jones also did a couple of albums that were influenced by the arrival of disco. This is one of them, Sounds and Stuff Like That, which is a very, very good album, has some great disco funk songs. Here, the title track is very good, I believe. And again, a lot of great guest musicians on this album, so this one is highly recommended. But probably my favorite from that mid-70s period is this one, Mellow Madness. This is a very funky album, a very soulful album, and I do believe this is from 1973. I didn't do my homework. Oh, 1975. Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna show a label here. It's on the A&M label. Mellow Madness is one of my favorite albums. This is an outstanding record. The next album in the box set from Vinyl Me Please is from 1978, and it was a soundtrack to The Wiz. The Wiz was a film adaptation of the Broadway musical with the all-black cast of The Wizard of Oz. And the lead parts were, of course, by Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. Now, The Wiz was not the only soundtrack, of course, that Quincy Jones did. I think he did like 50 soundtracks, composed music for 50 soundtracks, I believe. He got 7 Oscar nominations for them. And I got here a couple of others. This is The Dollars, another great soundtrack by the man, with Little Richard and Roberta Flack doing vocals on some of the tracks. I don't know the movie, but it's a great album. He also, later in his career, of course, did a lot for movies. He produced The Color Purple, which launched the career of Whoopi Goldberg, and launched the movie career of Oprah Winfrey. And through his life, he continued to produce movies or appear as an executive producer for soundtracks like this one. This is a soundtrack to the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee, executive producer Quincy Jones. And it features music by people as diverse as Lionel Hampton, Arrested Development, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, John Coltrane, Ray Charles, Duke Ellington. So combination of hip hop and jazz, and Someday We'll All Be Free here by Aretha Franklin. So a very nice soundtrack produced by Quincy Jones. So going back to The Wiz, this was actually the start of a very successful period for Quincy Jones, and I kind of understand why they included this album. This on the set of this movie that he met Michael Jackson. Michael asked him if he knew a producer to produce his next solo album. Quincy proposed a couple of names, but Michael wasn't convinced, and then Quincy Jones said, "Why don't you let me produce him?" The record company, CBS, wasn't convinced. Quincy Jones was too jazzy. He wasn't gonna pull it off, with the arrival of disco and funk riding high in the 1970s. So they didn't believe in him. But then, of course, Michael Jackson delivered Off the Wall, and everything changed. So I understand the inclusion of this album in the box set for Vinyl Me Please. And there are some good tracks on here, like You Can't Win, which was a solo song by Michael Jackson. It has a duet with Diana Ross, Ease on Down the Road, which are classic disco track, pivotal moment in Michael Jackson's career. Because, like I said, after that, he released, of course, it's Off the Wall. If you ask me, one of the greatest albums ever made. It was not just disco. There was a lot of influence there from other genres. There was a song written by Paul McCartney, one by Stevie Wonder. And Quincy Jones was a perfect producer for this because he included so many elements from the whole musical spectrum. There's a clip on YouTube where he says he got a note from Michael Jackson saying you have to leave the violins or the strings off in the beginning of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, that. And Quincy Jones said, no, we're not gonna do that. They're gonna leave it on. And it's one of the greatest openings of any disco song you can imagine. So this is a fantastic album from 1979. This was the beginning of a very successful period. He released a couple of albums, or produced a couple of albums, that contained just one hit after the other. Like I said, started in 1979 with Off the Wall. In 1980 came George Benson's Give Me the Night, with that incredible title song on there, which was a huge hit for George Benson, already an established jazz guitar player. In the same year, the Brothers Johnson released this album with that great disco funk song Stomp, which was an incredible hit song on there. Quincy Jones himself, and this album is included in the box set of Vinyl Me Please, released this album, The Dude, in 1981, which features one of his biggest hits, I Know Corrida, a great track, and Razzmatazz is on there, which was also a single. So again, huge collaborations on this album and a very big success for Quincy Jones. 1981. In 1982, he released this album with Donna Summer, which is, in my opinion, probably her best album, with tracks like Love is in Control, Finger on the Trigger, and State of Independence. Beautiful song with Donna Summer. This is a great early 80s disco album. And where's the picture? There they are. Quincy Jones and Donna Summer together. So, brilliant album from Donna Summer, 1982. And there was just no stopping Quincy Jones. In a couple of weeks, he recorded the biggest selling album of all time, Thriller, with Michael Jackson. I don't have to tell you anything about this, how successful this was, how this changed so much in music, how music was recorded and written, how it was promoted, how videos were made. The cultural impact of this album cannot be overestimated. And so, yeah, it's the work of Quincy Jones. By the way, a note, if you have an album that just says produced by Quincy Jones, you have an early copy, because all the copies after that, a couple of years later, Michael said, no, I want a credit as a co-producer. Quincy Jones gave it to him, there was no problem. But this is an early pressing if you have just the name Quincy Jones credited as a producer. Biggest selling album of all time. 1983, so we're started in 1978 with The Wiz, then George Benson, Brothers Johnson, Michael Jackson, Donna Summer. In 1983, he released this album. Now, many of you may not know this album. It's by James Ingram, who wrote the song PYT for Thriller. But the big hit on this album was, of course, Yamo Be There, which I have also as 45, with Michael McDonald, which was a big hit and is still a great song. There was no stopping Quincy Jones. The collaboration with Michael Jackson ended with this album. My second favorite Michael Jackson album after Off the Wall is Bad from 1987. Great album there as well. Now, I just posted a picture also on social media of Quincy Jones, studio engineer Bruce Swedian, and songwriter Rod Temperton together outside a recording studio, and noting that all the people who were essential in the making of Thriller and the success of the album, Quincy Jones, Rod Temperton, Bruce Swedian, Michael Jackson, CBS president Walter Yetnikoff, have all passed away now. Just a little side note here, all these albums, 1978, 79, 80, 80, 81, 82, 82, 83, they were all done by the same team. They were produced by Quincy Jones. Bruce Swedian was the engineer. Rod Temperton was a songwriter on some of the classic songs from these albums. And you see a lot of the same musicians returning on here as well. Greg Fillinganes on keyboards, Paulinho da Costa on percussion, Steve Porcaro on synthesizer, Larry Williams on synthesizer, Jerry Hay being the arranger for the horn sections. It's just insane. So as the late 80s arrived, this is the one but last album in the Vinyl Me Please box set, Back on the Block. This was released in 1989. Got the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1990. Again, working with all these great musicians and including hip hop. He worked on this album with Ice-T, the rapper. The Vinyl Me Please edition came as a double vinyl for the first time. The original was a single vinyl, and good stuff there. So more hip hop from Quincy Jones comes on this album from Young MC, Stone Cold Rhymin'. This features, of course, the hits Bust a Move and Know How, but the final track on the album, Just Say No, was produced, arranged, and mixed by Quincy Jones. This was released in the same year as the Back on the Block album. So yeah, from the late 90s, like I said, Quincy Jones started working with hip-hop artists, and hip-hop artists continued to sample his work. This is 1990, the year after. The Dream Warriors released this single, My Definition of a Bombastic Jazz Style, a fantastic track sampling, of course, soul bossa nova, a track that was released in 1962, I believe. And yeah, which was a huge success for the Dream Warriors, and renewed interest in the old jazz albums from Quincy Jones. Now, one last thing I want to show is the final album from the box set, which was recorded 2 months before the passing of that other jazz legend, Miles Davis. This is Miles and Quincy live in Montreux. It's a nice album. It's probably not the best live album from both these artists, but it's a very cool document because it's Quincy Jones working with a big orchestra again. So yeah, it's a nice album. It's a nice document. Recorded 2 months before the passing of Miles Davis, and a nice album to conclude the box set. That's it, my overview of the career of a legend, Quincy Jones. I hope you discovered some new music by him that you can check out, and I hope to see you soon. Peace.